This is one of the worst laptops that Apple has ever made. And that's a shame because it could have been one of the best. And now with the new M2 MacBook Air, I want to revisit the 12-inch MacBook and talk about why Apple could finally resurrect this thing and make it the laptop it was always meant to be. So get liked, get subscribed, hit the bell, do all this stuff, and let's get into it. The 12-inch Retina MacBook was essentially Apple's answer to the netbook, albeit they missed the trend by about 7 years. But never mind that, okay? This thing had a lot of promise. It is an entire Mac in an absolutely ridiculously tiny package. I mean, this thing is unmatched by anything Apple or anyone else has made in the past 7 years. This is a 7-year-old design, people. And it looks phenomenal. It is unbelievably thin and light and tiny, and I just love it. From the very moment in high school that I watched Tim Cook announce this laptop and make this little joke about it.
It is unbelievable. Can you even see it? I can't even feel it. There it goes.
I knew that I wanted one. And to be honest, I have owned a few of these over the years, and currently, and the biggest reason that I am sad about the demise of the 12-inch MacBook is because this was the last time that Apple really took a big, bold, risky move with the Mac. Everything that they've done, even on Apple Silicon, let's be honest, has been a little safe. I mean, look at the first batch of Apple Silicon. They didn't even change the design. That's pretty safe. The new generation of MacBook Pro was basically just going back to the old generation. They said, okay, fine, we'll make it thicker, we'll give it more battery, we'll give you your ports, and we'll give you a better screen, right? That's all well and good, but it's not anywhere near as bold or as risky as the 12-inch Retina MacBook was back in 2015. I mean, you have to remember that while this looks like a very familiar design now, in 2015, all the other Macs looked like this. So the 12-inch MacBook completely redefined Apple's design language. Everything on this was new at the time, from not having a light-up Apple logo to having a butterfly keyboard, a Force Touch trackpad, a fanless design, updated speaker arrangements that actually sounded good for once, USB-C only, a color other than silver. All of those things were brand new, untested territory when the 12-inch MacBook came out. Like, seriously, holy cow, that is a lot of new, risky moves to be taking. This is Apple we're talking about. This is the company that likes to re-release the iPhone 6 as the iPhone SE 3 8 years later. So I don't know what got into them when they decided to make this, but it's crazy. And what's really unfortunate is that they took that big risk. They came out with this radical product, and it didn't work. The centerpiece of why nobody really liked the original 12-inch MacBook is mainly because of what was powering it. So this was Apple's first fanless design, and that's already a very big step. But crucially, it was powered by 5th gen Intel. We're talking peak complacency era Intel. And they came out with these new Y series chips, and they were like, oh, guess what? Your whole system needs less than 5 watts of power. And Apple was like, oh, you mean we could make a whole Mac with just 5 watts of power? Which means we could have it be really small with not as many batteries and no fan? Oh, but the problem was those CPUs sucked. Not only were they unbelievably slow, but they were also hideously unreliable. Do not buy a 2015 Retina MacBook. Not only is it unbearably slow to use, but they have these catastrophic failure points. I mean, the USB-C ports burn out, the SSDs die, the CPUs die. It's a mess. And that's a shame, because Apple took a big risk. They delivered the most radical new product that they have done with the Mac in years. and it sucked. It failed. So it's not really surprising that they don't want to do it again. I mean, take a look at the MacBook Air, right? I love this thing. This is a fantastic product, okay? Apple really knocked it out of the park. But you can't exactly claim that they took a lot of risks with this, right? I mean, it's essentially a scaled back version of what we saw in the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro. Same exact design, they just made it thinner, but not so thin, by the way, that they had to do terraced batteries, because it's also not wedge-shaped, so the batteries are just kind of slapped in there, and to be honest, there's quite a bit of empty space around them. The logic board in here is, well, it's pretty normal. Max Tech took it out, and it's honestly pretty much the same size as what you would find in a MacBook Pro. And it's certainly not very dense. I mean, take a look at the logic board from a 12-inch Retina MacBook. It's freaking tiny, folks, and look how densely packed it is. And then there's the screen, right? Apple had to go to some pretty crazy lengths to make the display in this thing possible.
The panel is just 0.88 millimeters thin. The team has been able to miniaturize electronics and move them out of the way so more light comes through each pixel. Such our thinnest display, our most energy efficient display. It truly is the best display we've ever built onto a Mac.
The MacBook Air, well, it's a different size and a different shape, but it's the same basic technology that Apple has been using in their displays for the last many years. Now, I can't exactly blame Apple for the way that they made the M2 MacBook Air. I mean, for one, it's a fantastic product, right? It might be a little bit safe, but it still works. It's thin, it's light, it's powerful, it does everything you need it to do, and it looks great doing it. But you can see why they didn't want to mess with the recipe. It's their best-selling laptop. It's gonna be a design that's around for years to come. You wanna make sure that you're setting up for success. That's probably why the 12-inch Retina MacBook was introduced as a third entry-level laptop. They didn't exactly commit to it, right? They took a big risk in making this thing, but they were still selling the MacBook Air at the same price point, and they were still selling the MacBook Pro for the exact same MSRP as this laptop. But now, I really wish that Apple would bring it back. They had such a good thing going with the concept for the 12-inch MacBook. I mean, I know a lot of people who always wanted one of these, but never got it because it wasn't quite practical. So if Apple would make this again, but have it actually work this time, I think that they could succeed. I think they could pull it off. I'm curious, would you buy an Apple Silicon 12-inch Retina MacBook? Let me know in the comments below. I'm really curious to hear what you guys think. I don't think it would touch the MacBook Air in terms of popularity. I mean, this is kind of a sweet spot in terms of how thin and light it is, while also having a pretty big and usable screen. But if it's one of those things where, you're a person that's portability over everything else and you want that macOS experience, then if Apple were to take this design and modernize it, right? Give it the flat design, so no more wedge shape, which means you could spread the batteries out evenly, and they wouldn't even have to be that fancy terraced kind, right? They could just be normal batteries. You would have to keep the dimensions pretty much, because making the trackpad smaller or the keyboard narrower, that's not really gonna work. But there's a little bit of room here in these bezels for a larger display, so it could be more like a 12.5 inch. Give it that normal non-butterfly keyboard and an M2 chip, maybe even clock down. It would probably thermal throttle more than the M2 MacBook Air, but you know what? That's fine. That would be a phenomenal laptop, and I would absolutely buy it. I may have only paid $140 for this 12-inch Retina MacBook because the seller thought it was broken, but it wasn't. But I would pay full price. I would pay $12.99 for an M2 version of this. That's how good I think this concept is. The form factor, the thin and lightness, it is a fantastic form factor. I just love holding it. I can toss it over in my hands like a pizza. It's amazing. But it was just ahead of its time. It was on 14 nanometer Intel. There's not much you can do about that. It just didn't really make sense. And mine are the 2017 versions, right? They're not even as slow and anemic as the original ones. In fact, I would even go as far as to say they're pretty usable, even now, 5 years later. But they're still not quite what I think Apple wanted them to be. So please, Apple, try it again. Take a risk. Do something bold. We know you can do it. We know you want to do it. And let's be honest, you can afford it. So I am once again asking Apple, please bring back the 12-inch Retina MacBook. We think you can get it right this time. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'm curious to know if you had the choice between a 13-inch M2 MacBook Air and a slightly slower 12-inch version of it, which one would you pick? Let me know in the comments below. And as usual, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.